welcome back to Heroic Journeys, Leveling Up with Chantel and Tamara.
Today we're going to give you a map for leveling up, something that has been a real guidance for us over the years. But first, as promised in the last episode, we want to do a little bit of an introduction for those of you who are new to us and talk a little bit about why we have a passion for doing this podcast.
Okay, well, long story short about me, I was born in Winnipeg and grew up in Alberta, moved back to Manitoba as a teenager. I'll share more of my story later on as we talk about the hero's journey. I have 3 kids who are, my youngest is 16, oldest 2 are in their 20s. And yeah, that's a little blurb about me.
And I'm Tamara. I'm an educator. We both live in southern Manitoba. I grew up in Saskatchewan and at age 13 moved to southern Manitoba, which was a huge, tremendous culture shock for me. I grew up in a Mennonite family. My father was a pastor, had a wonderful childhood and upbringing, but moving to southern Manitoba was tremendously difficult for me because I've always had a real need for spiritual depth and a framework that is large and expansive. And so living in a culture with strong overtones of fundamentalism was really difficult for me, to the point where I lost my singing voice at the end of high school. And to me, that was a real metaphor for losing my song and my ability to speak and sing my truth. And so I've been on a quest to reclaim my voice ever since. And this podcast is part of that, and also as a way of expressing the things that are really important and deep to me.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our topic for today. We introduced in the last episode the idea of leveling up and how at this time in our human history this is an imperative for all of us. And so we wanted to give a map and a framework that's been very useful for us and that I see popping up again and again. So we talked, Chantal, a little bit about metaphors and analogies for leveling up, and you had some really interesting ones that are...
Well, the one that I use the most is this Mario Bros, where you have like these different caves you can go down into, or these different things you can do, and then you just find ways past the challenges, and then once you figure it out, you can level up. And so I feel like we do that in life.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of how art imitates life. And often art, when it's imitating life, gives us metaphors and ideas for our next step in the human journey. We talked, too, about the spiral staircase and this idea of spiraling up. And you go through life and sometimes you feel like you're facing the same issues again and again. But really, each time, there's kind of a new twist to it because you've advanced a little more, you've matured, or you've grown in some way, and so that spiraling journey just continues and continues.
Yeah, because we have more resources. It's like that one quote that I sent to you. What was it about the river?
Yeah. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and it's not the same person.
Yeah.
And that's Heraclitus, so that's gone from ancient times.
Yeah. So I figure the spiral staircase, or this, as we come around and learn the same lesson again, we have more resources to go deeper, to level up, whichever metaphor you prefer.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny how life shifts us, like individually, but also collectively. It's almost like there's a point at which life says, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, says that they're ready for the next step. And so I guess you could look at COVID that way. Mm-hmm. That was kind of our testing ground for the readiness to move into some new phase of our human experience. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to talk today about the Hero's Journey framework, which has been enormous for both of us in terms of our life and growth. For me, it helped me get through a cancer journey, which I wrote all about in my blog, and there'll be a link that you can go and find afterwards below in the information box. But this is something I discovered probably 15, 20 years ago. Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And if you're not familiar with Joseph Campbell, he was a mythologist who was fascinated with mythologies from all different cultures around the world. And what he found as he explored and read massive amounts of literature from different cultures was that there was sort of one pattern, one framework, he called it the monomyth, that is found in all of them. And he named it the hero's journey, and I like to call it the heroic journey because that's a little more gender neutral. But this idea of this hero's journey is something that we all go on. We go on through the trajectory of our lives. We can go on through different experiences in our lives, and even in a day you can have a hero's journey. And so on multiple levels we're living this hero's journey. And Joseph Campbell wrote and talked much about it in his life. And George Lucas, who created Star Wars, was someone who read Joseph Campbell's work, and he created the Star Wars movies based on the hero's journey. So if you're a fan of Star Wars, as we go through the stages, you may recognize them in Star Wars.
I always think of the Lord of the Rings whenever anyone says the hero's journey. And, like, I don't even think we've ever had a conversation where the hero's journey hasn't been mentioned.
Right.
Like,
True
it's
enough,
just
yeah.
so a part of life.
Or Lord of the Rings, because I'm such a nerd about that. So we will bring in Lord of the Rings as we're going through the stages, and Chantal's going to share from real life some of the examples of how those different stages have played out for her.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take it away.
Just dive into stage one. Stage one of the heroic journey is ordinary life. We're living our ordinary life, operating by our status quo, but it's become too small for us. So it can look like victimhood, dissatisfaction, complacency. What it looked like for me, I guess at the beginning of my hero's journey, I'm the oldest of 10 kids. I was homeschooled in a strict religion, and I was really in victimhood a lot of the time. Kind of like surviving my life.
So in Lord of the Rings, to take a movie example, we have Frodo living his ordinary life, which is in the Shire, a life of innocence and uneventfulness, and he's just walking out in the fields and reading books under the trees, and it's a sweet life, but it's not a life that is going to create a hero.
Mm-hmm. So then goes on to stage two, the call to adventure. Since we're not stepping up to the plate, life sends us a call to adventure, something that shakes up our status quo and asks us to step into the path of adventure. So for me, the kind of earthquakes that shook up my life, one of them was that my parents changed religions about 13 years ago, and that kind of did a number to my identity as my siblings and I kind of just scattered and found our own way and didn't have that closeness that we had growing up. And my siblings died shortly after that too, and it was just like a lot of loss, a lot of grief, a big call to adventure. But I didn't see it like that at the time.
No, and that's typical. We don't usually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Lord of the Rings, the call to adventure comes with Bilbo's birthday party, and at the height of the celebration, he gets up to make a speech and puts on the ring on his finger and disappears. And then he leaves the ring behind at Bag End for Frodo to find. And so the ring showing up in his life is what starts Frodo on his whole epic adventure.
Mm-hmm. And then on to stage three, the refusal of the call. We usually do not welcome the unexpected and try to refuse the call, or someone tries to refuse it for us. Can look like turning down an opportunity or sabotaging ourselves, but the call keeps coming until we have no choice but to accept it. And so, in my journey of loss and grief, I had a lot of resistance, a lot of I know I've always been accepting of my friends' cultures and religions, and I just found that my parents changing religions was just a totally different animal. And so a lot of resistance came before the acceptance, for sure.
You know, I think a lot of resistance comes from our belief systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Haven't we read many times that science shows that having our beliefs challenged affects our brain and our physicality in the same way as if we were being attacked
Yeah.
by a
A
lion
wild
or
animal,
something?
yeah.
And in the Lord of the Rings, the resistance or the refusal to the call comes with like Frodo just putting the ring away in an envelope and sealing it with some wax and, you know, hiding in a chest or something somewhere. And hopefully that's the end of it, right? He's out of sight, out of mind. We tend to rationalize things away or, you know, put it in a box and means I don't have to deal with it.
We all do that at some time. It's kind of like, you know, there's a dragon in the cave, but we run away from it or pretend it's not there, hoping that it'll just take care of itself on its own.
The dragon is sleeping, so let's just pretend it's not there.
Yeah. Anyways, on to stage 4. The wise guide shows up. So this could be a person, a book, an animal ally, like our own inner guidance, just anything that will give us a higher perspective. And the wise guide helps us accept the call to adventure, arms us with good advice and tools to help us on our journey. And so for me, that came in the form of the Elephant Journal. I discovered it on Facebook, and man, did I read those articles. It introduced me to mindfulness for the first time and meditation, what it really meant versus the meaning that I had growing up of what meditation meant. And it just helped me so much to view my thoughts not as myself. It helped me to lose the guilt that I felt for thinking a bad thought. That was so big for me, and it helped me a lot in my grief process too, to be able to separate a lot of my to be able to just have some awareness about me versus being caught up in, you know, when we talk about parts therapy in the past, it's like I had totally identified with those parts, but now I could see them as separate from me.
You know, what you're saying makes me think one of the real important functions of a wise guide is to help us step away from ourselves so we can actually view things from a higher or a larger perspective. So I think for a lot of us, wise guides show up in the form of books or online communities or courses or for Frodo, of course, the wise guide is Gandalf, who shows up at crucial moments throughout the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And the important thing about a wise guide is they'll never do anything for you that you can do for yourself. So, you know, there are times when you feel abandoned maybe by your wise guide or where's Gandalf when we need him? But really the hero's journey is meant to grow us into heroes. And so there are times when somebody can't do things for us.
Yeah, the wise guide is literally a guide. It's not someone who is, you know, you're going to be codependent with, like.
Right? Yeah, and as parents, it's really easy to fall into that helicopter parenting trap because you want to be the wise guide for your student, or for your child, but that doesn't mean that you do things for them. It means that you give them tools.
Ask the right questions.
Yeah, and actually sometimes push them, which takes us actually to the next stage.
The next stage is stage 5, crossing the threshold. This is the moment where we leave our familiar life and step into the new world of adventure, the point of no return. Things are usually different in this new world, different rules, things work differently, etc. So for me, this looked like leaving the church, leaving religion, and actually leaving my marriage. So I was starting to think for myself and choose myself, and
those are a lot of thresholds.
It felt like it. It felt like I was creating a whole new identity for myself, to be honest. So when you leave your family identity and your religion, you have to really decide what you believe.
And I think that's part of the reluctance to accept the call, the refusal, right? Because something in us knows if I accept this call, if I go on this adventure, I will change, and that will change how everyone sees me. It will change my relationships.
Coming out of the closet in any way is...
And the thing about refusing the call is that you can think you're refusing it, but it will come back again and again and again, you know. And so for Frodo, that ring showed up. He hid it away, and then all of a sudden the Black Riders are showing up in the Shire looking for the ring, and there it is right back in his life. And so that call will keep coming. I know somebody that had a little fender bender, and then a couple months later had a bigger fender bender, and then a few months later than that had an actual accident. And these are the kind of things where you sort of say, what am I being called to notice? Is there something I should be paying attention to?
And yeah, that's kind of the difference between the victim mentality and the hero mentality. You know, the victim mentality is why me? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And the hero mentality is what can I learn from this?
Right. And for a person like that, the message may be you need to make time for more sleep, or, you know, there's too much going on in your life, you're distracted, that kind of thing. Like we get these calls and we rationalize them away because we're so stuck in our left brains looking for logical reasons, where the right brain would have the bigger picture. And if we just kind of drop into life as metaphor, life as a hero's journey, these stages can help us really notice what's going on and have some deeper awareness.
Yeah, and it really helped me too to not feel like I'm supposed to be happy all the time. Like, you know, that every movie we watch has both good and bad. You know, that
Yeah.
it all is allowed to be. Accepting that was a big thing, a big step from victim to hero. And I mean, I still fall into victim here and, you know, now and again, but overall.
But once you have the framework,
yeah,
you can pull yourself out more easily,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and for Frodo, crossing the threshold was leaving the Shire. And if you watch the movie, there's a moment where he and Samwise, his trusty sidekick, they're in a cornfield or something, and Sam stops short and says, and then Frodo looks at him and says, "What is it?" And Sam says, "If I take one more, this is the furthest away I've ever been. If I take one more step, something about I will be leaving home." So it was that idea of going out into the unknown, taking that step. And I don't know if there's anything we have more fear of than the unknown.
Mm-hmm. And hypnotherapy, like when I was introduced to it, was kind of like that for me, you know, because a lot of people they don't know exactly what it is, right? And you kind of have to step over that threshold and just kind of dive in and be like, oh, that's what it is. You know, it's nothing like I knew existed.
And we have, you know, without realizing it, because this is the ocean we swim in, we live in this paradigm where certain things are legitimate and other things are not legitimate. And as an educator, I know that I have certain conditionings around what is sanctioned. And so...
Yeah, what is woo-woo?
Yeah, what is woo-woo? So, you know, there's still that part of me that has a fear of, oh, people are going to think I'm a complete flake. But so be it.
Yeah. Right,
next stage.
Yeah, stage 6, allies and adversaries. In the new world, we have to discover who our allies are and who will help and support us, and who are our adversaries who might test us to make us grow our strength and help us claim our power. And often those allies can be such a gift, or like both can be a gift. The allies and the adversaries are such a gift, because often you can't discover a certain resource until you've had to come up with the power to deal with a situation like that. I found definitely an ally in you. I feel like we understand each other, and that's been such a gift. And also, after I left my marriage, I found a life partner who was very supportive on my hypnotherapy journey and everything, and we were able to talk about it to someone who understood. And yeah, that's what it looked like for me.
So Joseph Campbell talks about enemies, allies and enemies, but I like adversaries better, because on the grand scheme of things, we have no enemies. Our enemies are adversaries because they push us to do better, to be better, to grow tools, to grow abilities that we wouldn't be pushed to do otherwise. You know, like the grain of sand in the oyster that makes it form a pearl. So in The Lord of the Rings, of course, Samwise is Frodo's greatest, most trusted, loyal friend. And then he meets other people who at first might seem like adversaries and turn out to be allies, like Aragorn. And then there are others like Boromir who appear friend-like at first and then turn out to be an adversary or an enemy. And of course, Gollum kind of walks the line between both. So there is a bit of a blur between these, because sometimes the people we think are our allies don't help us out in the way that we really need to. They might actually, you know, sit with us in our grievances and kind of legitimate our victimhood by, you know, giving us reasons to continue to feel our grievances and not actually step up to the plate and take the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting if we're very discerning about the people
enabling.
in our life.
That's enabling.
Enablers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then different people play these different roles at different times. And so all of us have been an ally at some point to someone, and all of us have been an adversary.
Yeah, like in every story, there is like the bad guy, right? There's the, what do they call it?
The villain?
Yeah, the villain. Every
Yeah.
story has a villain.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like a lot of the times when we get triggered from someone else, it really is a gift to show us what we need to heal, what needs to be healed, or what
Yeah.
part of ourselves is reacting to that. Because if there wasn't a wounded part of us reacting to it, it wouldn't bother us. You know, like
Right.
if I said to you, like, oh, I hate your green hair, like you'd be like, I don't have green hair, like you're an idiot, right? Like it wouldn't bother you. But if there was some part of you that said, oh, I do have green hair, you know, like, oh no, right? Then it would be a bit of a trigger.
Yeah. And I think if you start looking at every trigger as a call to adventure, right? A mini adventure. I have a chance to face this thing that triggers me. Then you can look at this framework and take the journey, even with small things like that. Although a trigger might not be small.
Right. Which leads us to stage 7, which is tests and trials. We can add triggers to that.
Yeah. Trials and triggers.
Yeah. No one gets to be a hero without being tested. We go through a series of challenges that force us to develop new abilities and to grow. So I just look at that in my life as just navigating the great changes that comes when you leave your church, your religion, your family, your marriage. There's a lot of things to navigate.
Yeah.
So how did it look like in Lord of the Rings?
Oh, well, I mean, so many things happened along that big journey from the Shire to Mount Doom. Being captured, they lost Gandalf in the mines of Moria. So battles, facing attacks, treachery from a trusted ally when Boromir tried to steal the ring from Frodo. So Frodo was tested in many ways. And as you watch the movie, you can see every time he's in a situation of danger, there's that temptation to put on the ring and disappear, which gets stronger and stronger. So even just the temptation of the power of the ring is a test that he's constantly facing.
Yeah. And I mean, when we go through trials and, you know, we kind of want to run away, you know, like that's just human nature to
be rescued.
Right, exactly.
Like, who's going to come and pull me out of this mess?
Yeah, and that's not being the hero, right? That's looking for the hero. And then on to stage 8, the ultimate ordeal. This is the big do or die event of the journey. The stakes are at their highest, and there's a prospect of failure. In movies, often even death. We are tested to our utmost limits. Often there is a real sense of being alone and abandoned, and we face this test alone. And to me, like, the clear answer to what that was overall in my life was COVID. You know, because we all had sort of different beliefs and stances on COVID, and even in partnerships and friendships, we had all different ideas of what was right and wrong and who was good and bad, and it did make a lot of us feel fearful and alone.
I think COVID presented an ultimate ordeal for a lot of families and relationships. Yeah, that was definitely a tough test for humanity as a whole. It's still ongoing in some ways. For Frodo, of course, the ultimate test is, can he throw the ring into the fire at Mount Doom? And you see the struggle that he's in at the end and nearly succumbs to the power of the ring. And then Gollum, we've looked on Gollum as an enemy through the whole movie. He shows up and acting out of his own desire for the ring. He actually saves Frodo's life by taking it from him. So that ultimate ordeal is really not so much even a physical ordeal, but it really challenges our deepest beliefs about who we are.
Yeah.
And am I ready to give up my identity? Am I ready to give up who I thought I was to become something larger? Yeah.
And to me, with COVID, and I feel like what we'll be facing in the future too, is like the pressure to pick a side. And I really like the idea of, like, you don't have to pick a side, you only have to have values. You know, you don't have to pick left or right necessarily. You just have to choose what you want. Like, you have to choose love. Like, love can transmute a lot of things.
Yeah, and that really points to where we want to go next after this, which is all about getting in touch with our values and our highest intentions and what it is that we want.
Mm-hmm. So where were we in the stages? Stage
9.
reward. If and when we pass the ultimate ordeal, there's a reward. It can be an outer treasure, something material, or an inner treasure. It's usually inner treasure. A new awareness or understanding or a new ability. And definitely I found that with every trial and tribulation, with every lesson I learned, it just gave me a new inner resource. And ultimately a new mindset, a new, more positive mindset. Like that inner critic was quieter and the inner coach was a lot louder.
And for Frodo, the reward, of course, is he saved Middle-earth. He saved the Shire, his home that he loves, and all the people that he cares about. But also, if you compare him at the end of the movie to the sort of carefree, youngish, teenager-ish person that he was at the beginning, or hobbit that he was, there's something deeper about him. There's something more mature and wiser. And so that's also something he'll bring back to his community.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the next step is stage 10, return. We return to our ordinary world. Although we know things will never be as they were, we come back changed. And yeah, like I said, with the resources.
Yeah.
It's kind of like those two steps are very close together. Stage 11, sharing the gift. The heroic journey is not over until we share some gift that we have brought back with us to contribute to the greater good. And I feel like this podcast is that for us. And, hypnotherapy is kind of like that too. But I also feel like our example or our resonance is what we bring back. I feel like that example and resonance is often more powerful than trying to be the savior. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of empaths feel the call or whatever to be a savior, but at some point they realize that everyone has to save themselves.
Yeah.
And that all you can do is kind of live your life, and if people ask for advice, give it. Or help guide them.
I love that idea of resonance. That's become a big way of how I view the world and interactions between people. And I think about in The Lord of the Rings, when the hobbits all returned to the Shire, they left on foot and they're coming back on horses, and they've got their elven robes on them, and there's just something a little princely about them. And so they're coming back with a different vibe. And the people of the Shire kind of look at them a little suspiciously. You know, are these our boys that we, we knew how they used to get in mischief, and here they are coming back looking like princes, like what's going on? And you can just kind of see the twinkle in the hobbits' eyes as they're noticing how people are reacting to them differently.
Yeah. And then, stage 12, ordinary life. Settle back into a rhythm of life, and then the cycle can start over.
Right. Until you're ready to grow again. And another metaphor kind of for this is like the snake shedding its skin, right? The snake keeps growing, and sooner or later that skin is too small. Time for a hero's journey and shedding that skin and growing, expanding into something larger.
And like that one book that we talked about a couple of episodes ago, Life is in the Transitions. Like it's kind of like that. Life is in the transitions. I think we've been kind of raised to believe that, we will somehow get to a point where we've got everything figured out. I don't think so.
Not gonna happen.
No.
Sorry. Yeah. So hopefully you will be hearing about the hero's journey. I'm sure it will come up many a time in our podcast episodes. And so we wanted to give you that framework. And what we see just observing the world and looking at the larger picture is that, number one, this is a framework that you hear more and more about. The hero's journey is popping up everywhere. And we have also noticed, just looking at culture around us, how this idea of becoming a hero and being the hero of your own story is becoming an urgent message. If you look at the proliferation of superhero movies, like there's just been, in the Marvel franchise alone, I don't know how many movies have come out in the last 10, 15 years, superhero movies. And, there'll be one superhero franchise, Spider-Man or whatever, and then all of a sudden these superheroes are coming together and forming alliances, and so it just feels like life is giving us that message. It's time to level up and become your own hero.
Yeah.
So,
and I'd encourage you, any story you read, any movie you watch, to look for these 12 stages, and you'll find them.
yeah, it doesn't matter what movie, you'll find it. Go watch Mr. Bean's Holiday. Watch Home Alone.
Yeah, and like you can go through the whole stage, all of these stages in one day sometimes, and it repeats itself. So
yeah,
it's just a different perspective on life.
Wherever you're at, you're in some stage or other of the hero's journey. And so the framework can really help you take a step back and be a little more objective, and actually see that sometimes things that feel really challenging, they're actually fuel for your growth. If you can put yourself in a hero mentality and pull yourself out of the victim mentality. So that's it for our podcast today.
Until next time.
What's our tagline? I can't remember.
It's be the hero
of your own story. There we go.